Hello and welcome to episode 62, where we will be looking at the last in the series of 6 Panorama Screen Game & Watches from Nintendo. With today's star and focus being the super rare handheld called Donkey Kong Circus. And being first offered for sale September 6 back in 1984, this console sold somewhere between 100 and 250,000 units worldwide, was given the early production code MK-96, which was likely a mistake, and somehow got switched, or mixed up with the earlier production code of DC-95, that was ascribed to the previously issued Mickey Mouse, that was the Disney licensed version of today's game, as both shared identical gameplay. This was the 44th game and watch ever issued by Nintendo, and as you see here, in the opening section of the instructions booklet, we have a brief table of contents, that's followed up on the opposite page with a photograph of an open console, with all its primary functions, buttons, and in-game characters and sprites being identified and labeled. Battery requirements, their handling, storage and their safety, coupled to their maintenance, is swiftly followed up by the details on both time and alarm settings and functionality, before moving on to page 4 of the booklet where a brief overview is given on how to play this game. The information in this section covers the theme, or backstory, as well as how points are awarded, and how lost lives are achieved, before finishing up on the award of any bonus points. The black and white images of a barrel balancing Donkey Kong juggling, is shown here, surprisingly. The infographics section only covers 4 windows, across 2 pages. This, if I'm brutally honest, merely reflects the simplicity of the actual gameplay for the unit, and no further guidance is needed. With the cautions and specifications rounding out this instructions booklet, please feel free to pause the video at any point to read the text in detail. However, now it's time to see a little representational gameplay. As we have already acknowledged, today's gameplay is identical to that of last week's console, the Panorama Screen Mickey Mouse. As we join the gameplay, we see the score is 352 points, and a pineapple has just been dropped, for the loss of a single life. With the pineapples being mostly green, and the fireballs being mostly orange, it is sometimes difficult to remember which is which. But as we head towards a score of 428 points, Donkey Kong inadvertently catches a fireball, for the loss of a second life, shown by the 2 Donkey Kong head icons in the upper left of the screen. And before you know it, Donkey Kong accidentally catches another fireball for a final score of 431 points, that completes the game. If we look at the top left, the 3 Donkey Kong icons confirm that the game is over. If we subsequently push the Mode A button, the highest previous score will be displayed. With Donkey Kong Circus at the forefront, we see here the entire range of Nintendo's Panorama Screen Game & Watches. And here we see the standby screens, of the entire Panorama series, running through the motions and displaying their simulated gameplay. Starting with today's star and focus of our show, this is sadly something of a goodbye flyover to the range, as today's review wraps up this collection for our channel. These full-color liquid crystal displays are, in my humble opinion, simply amazing. To think the developers at Nintendo achieved this feat, despite the technology limitations, is absolutely mind-blowing. And the fact that they're powered by just 2 LR or S or 44 batteries, well, that just adds to the wow factor. Couple that to their age at the time of filming, which makes them nearly 40 years old, it becomes clear why they've become a collector's dream. And while I've really enjoyed reviewing this series, that fact that this game is just an unlicensed version of Mickey Mouse should be addressed. Some countries would not receive licensed Disney variants, and a license costs money, and for Nintendo, Donkey Kong was becoming a valuable and recognizable asset in its own right. The story of Donkey Kong only began less than 3 years before today's Game & Watch was issued. Back in 1981, a gorilla named Donkey Kong came out of nowhere to dominate the then popular arcade scene, and since then generations of Marios have been battling him ever since. So let's learn just a little about the digital primate who changed gaming forever. We've previously mentioned in several earlier episodes that Donkey Kong was Mario's debut, only he was called Jumpman. The beloved plumber was first created for the 1981 arcade version of Donkey Kong. However, he didn't receive his name until the game's follow-up, Donkey Kong Jr. While the then young and inexperienced Nintendo game designer, Shigeru Miyamoto, was still planning the original arcade game, the character we would come to know as Mario was briefly known only as Mr. Video, or Asen, a Japanese term for a generic middle-aged man, or an any-man type character. However, Mario was given his signature red overalls and blue shirt from his inception. Conceived at the time as stereotypical carpenter's attire, this was reportedly done to make his body more visible, while his cap and mustache were the developer's best bet for making his face look more distinct, or stand out from the crowd, in a time when arcade systems couldn't yet handle hair or facial features. For Donkey Kong's Italian hero, Nintendo chose the initial name Jumpman, likely because of its similarity to the popular themed Walkman and Pac-Man from that era. The real Mario, or at the very least, the inspiration for his name, was likely a landlord, and not a plumber. Ironically, during the development of Donkey Kong Jr., a Nintendo employee reportedly pointed out that the new computer game character they'd developed looked a lot like their building's landlord, Mario Seagale, to which they all agreed, and Mario the Gaming Giant was created. The original lady character from the first game, who was unnamed, became Pauline at the same time, and probably in the same discussion as that of the Mario likeness remark. So when seeking suggestions for a suitable name for the lady character, a name that was suggested was of a team member's wife, which they thought was called either Polly, or Pauline, which they also agreed was a good name. While developing the Proto-Mario, who would later be known as Jumpman from the original Donkey Kong arcade game, couldn't actually jump. Nintendo's Miyamoto went on to explain that his original vision for the game and the Mario character didn't include him having the ability to jump. However, we've previously covered on this channel, in a previous episode, that Donkey Kong cabinets were just recycled and unused radar scope games that failed to sell in the United States. These games' cabinets had both a joystick and a button, which when repurposed, had to be prescribed a function. This extra button, that initially lacked any task, ultimately led to Mario learning his signature move. Miyamoto added that his original idea of his fledgling game was to have the character that would later become Mario just escape from a maze. He also thought that allowing players to jump and avoid dangers would have spoiled the strategic elements of the game he had in mind. But then, he goes on to say, our development team thought, if you had a barrel rolling down a slope towards you, what would you do? His colleague, Iwata, simply added, you'd jump over it. Miyamoto remembers that they all laughed, and said, of course you'd jump over it. So we decided to use the extra button to allow players to jump, and when we made a prototype to try it out, it worked really well. I think that if we hadn't allowed Mario to jump, it would have most likely proved to be a horrendously difficult game to play. But the gaming history books records the stunning success of the 1981 arcade release, and how Nintendo found their first, and most iconic franchise characters. And this wraps up not only today's review of Donkey Kong Circus, but that of the entire range of Panorama Screen Series of Game & Watches. These are a fantastic set to collect and own, and the last bit of today's show will be awarded to Donkey Kong Circus, with a nice montage of pictures to see the episode out. And while these are quite rare, they still regularly sell and are traded in the various collector groups. Well, with the show now pretty much over, it's time to ask for a little help for our channel. A simple thumbs up, by hitting that like button does so much good, or perhaps just adding a comment below, or better still subscribing to our channel for its weekly updates. But mostly, I'd just like to say thank you to each and everyone for joining me here today and watching our show. So thank you.